What up? Mr. Nelson here with day 2 of 7.3. We're going to be doing long division of polynomials today. So we're going to start out by dividing just numbers like we did back in elementary school. So let's set it up like we did back in probably 3rd or 4th grade. We'll write a 2 out here. And we'll put our little division symbol. And we write down 3,245. And so 2 goes into 3 one time. So then we go 1 times 2 is 2. 3 minus 2 is 1, and 2 does not go into 1. So we drop down this 2. There's a minus here. Should probably write that. And then 2 does go into 12. So 2 goes into 12 6 times. So we'd write a 6 up here. Then we do 6 times 2, that's 12. And so 12 minus 12 is 0. So then we bring down the 4. 2 goes into 4 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4. Make my page a little longer here. Subtract them. 4 minus 4 is 0, so drop down the 5. 2 goes into 5 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4. Subtract, and we get 1. 2 does not go into 1, so we usually, back when we learned this, we said 1,622 with a remainder of 1. And then as you got older, you realized, well, instead of writing remainder of 1, we'll write, it's really 1 out of 2, so, and 1/2. Okay, so let's do this one as well. I'll set it up the same way. We'll go 16 divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 16 does not go into 12, but it does go into 123. So I'm not sure how many times it goes in. So what I'm going to do is just pull up my calculator, and I'll go 123 divided by 16. So it goes in 7 with some remainder. Okay, so I'm going to write that down. We'll put 7 up here. Then 7 times 16, well, let's see, 7 times 6 is 42. I'll put a 4 up here. So 7 times 1 is 7, plus 4 is 11. So 7 times 16 is 112. Alright, so now we do 123 minus 112. And that would be a 1, and a 1, and a 0. So 16 does not go into 11. So, bring down the 4. And I'm pretty confident that 16 does go into 114. And I'm pretty confident it goes in 7 times. Because 7 times 16 is 112. We just saw that. Alright, 114 minus 112 is 2. Drop down the 5. 16 does go into 25. It only goes in once. So we'll write a 1 up here. 1 times 16 is 16. Subtract, and we're left with 9. So our remainder is 9, or we could say 771 and 9/16. Okay. So, very much a warm-up into what we're going to be doing. So far we have learned how to add polynomials. We just kind of combine like terms. We've learned how to subtract polynomials. Once again, combining like terms, but the subtraction makes all these negative or opposite. Multiplying polynomials, this was like foiling. So we've done adding, subtracting, multiplying. Naturally, today we're going to do dividing. So it's just like what we had just done, except we've got x's involved instead of numbers. So we'll set it up the same way. If we were dividing by 16 in the last problem, we wrote that out here. So we're dividing by x plus 6, so we'll write that on the outside. And then underneath, make a big long division symbol, we'd write this polynomial. So x to the 4th plus 7x to the 3rd and then I'm going to leave a space here. I'm going to do minus 36x. And the reason I'm leaving a space is we have an x to the 4th and x to the 3rd. Well, we need to put an x to the second term here. You can't just skip right to the x term. So we'll do plus, well, there's 0 x squareds. So we need a placeholder there. And then there's no constant term either, so we'll put a plus 0 as well. So we need a placeholder for anything that's missing, and here the x squared's missing and the constant term's missing, so we'll just put zeros there. Alright, and let's go. We're going to do the exact same thing that we did with the other one. Now, I say exact same thing, but it's actually a little bit trickier. Whatever we put up here, the idea is we want it to cancel out this x to the 4th. So what could I put up here so that when I multiply it by x plus 6, I'm going to get x to the 4th plus something else. So I'm going to choose x to the 3rd. And I like to line these up, so the x to the 3rd goes over the x to the 3rd. I like to just kind of keep them all in a line, just to be neat. Okay, so x to the 3rd times x will give me x to the 4th, and that's good, because when we subtract those, the x to the 4th is going to cancel out. And then x to the 3rd times 6 is 6x to the 3rd. Okay, then we subtract them. X to the 4th minus x to the 4th, that's nothing. 7x to the 3rd minus 6x to the 3rd is x to the 3rd. And then here we drop down the 0x squared. Okay, so now what could we put up here so that when we multiply by x plus 6 it cancels out the x to the 3rd? So that's going to be an x squared, a positive x squared. So x squared times x is x to the 3rd. X squared times 6 is 6x squared. And now we subtract. So x to the 3rd minus x to the 3rd, that cancels out, that's 0. 0x squared minus 6x squared is minus 6x squared, or negative 6x squared. And then we drop down the minus 36x. Alright, so now what do we put up here so that when we multiply it by x we get negative 6x squared? So hopefully you're telling me it's negative 6x. So negative 6x times x is negative 6x squared. And then negative 6x times 6 would be negative 36x. We subtract, and look at that. When we subtract those, we end up with negative 6x squared minus negative 6x squared. That cancels out, that's 0. And negative 36x minus negative 36x is also 0. So the remainder is 0. And you don't really have to write remainder 0. So this is kind of cool, that if the remainder is 0, this is a very special case. And so on the next slide it explains that. The key idea here is, if the remainder is 0 when polynomials are divided, then the divisor is a factor of the dividend. So what I mean is, this x plus 6 is a factor of this polynomial. And so, much like we did on the first problem, if I took 1,622.5 times 2, I would get this number. I would get 3,245. So if I take x to the 3rd plus x squared minus 6x and multiply it by x plus 6, I will get this polynomial. You know, division is just the opposite of multiplication. Cool. Alright, let's do a couple more. pause the video and try this one on your own. See if you can do this. Otherwise, just follow along. So, we're dividing x to the third plus 3 divided by x minus 1. So the x minus 1 is going to go on the outside. And then x to the third plus 3. Well, x to the third, but remember we need the 0x squared. And the 0x. And then the plus 3. Okay, so what do we put up here so that when we multiply it by x minus 1, we get it to be x to the third? So that's going to be x squared. So x squared times x is x to the third. And then x squared times negative 1 is negative 1x squared. And then we subtract. So these two cancel out. 0 minus negative 1 is just x squared. Sorry, 0 minus 0x squared minus negative 1x squared is x squared. And so what do we put up here? We put up an x, because x times x will give us x squared. So x times x is x squared. Oh, I forgot to drop down this 0x. Okay, so x times x is x squared. X times negative 1 is negative x. We subtract. These cancel out. 0 minus negative x. 0x minus negative x is positive x. Then we drop down the 3. And so what we would put up here so that we get x is just plus 1. 1 times x is x. And 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. So x minus x is 0. 3 minus negative 1 is 4. So this one has a remainder of 4. But we're not going to write remainder of 4 like we did in 4th grade. We're going to actually be a little more clever there. So on the first problem we did, it had a remainder of 1, so we wrote 1 over 2. So since this one has a remainder of 4, we're going to write not 4 over 2, but we'll go 4 over our divisor, x minus 1. So this is how we deal with remainders when it comes to dividing polynomials. So it's x squared plus x plus 1 plus this remainder, which is 4 over x minus 1. Very similar to, we'll go back to that first problem, where if it's dividing by 2, the 2 is the denominator on the fraction and the remainder is the numerator. Here, the 4 is the numerator and the x minus 1 is the denominator. So if we took x minus 1 times this stuff, we would get x to the third plus 3. And you should know right now, this is not a factor. X minus 1 is not a factor of x to the third plus 3. Because there is a remainder. If the remainder was 0, then it would be a factor. But this is not a nice factor of this polynomial, which means it does not cross the x-axis at 1. Okay, one more for today, I believe. Yep. We've got 4x to the fourth plus x to the third minus 10x squared plus 5x minus 20 divided by x squared minus 7x plus 3. Okay, so it's the same idea. We're going to write x squared minus 7x plus 3 and then divided by only 4x to the fourth plus x to the third. So 3 minus 10x squared plus 5x minus 20. Alright, so we have to figure out what are we going to put up here so that, and I hope you realize we're really only concerned about the x squared here. So what am I going to put up here that I multiply by x squared so that I get 4x to the fourth? So that's going to be 4x squared. So 4x squared times x squared is 4x to the fourth. And that's what we're looking for. We want it to cancel out this first term. And actually, since this is a trinomial, we're going to bring down the next two terms as well. So this is 0. We get x to the third. Oh shoot, I'm sorry, let me back up here a second. I got ahead of myself. Okay, so 4x squared times x squared is 4x to the fourth. Okay, 4x squared times negative 7x is negative 28x to the third. That looks better. And 4x squared times positive 3 is 12x squared. Okay, so this 4x to the fourth minus 4x to the fourth, that cancels out. X to the third minus negative 28x to the third, that's 29x to the third. And then negative 10x squared minus 12x squared is negative 22x squared. Okay, now we can drop down the 5x. We're just going to drop down 1. I was wrong before. And now we need to figure out what am I going to put up here so when I multiply it by x squared, I get 29x to the third. So, 29x. 29x times x squared is 29x to the third. 29x times negative 7x. Oh boy, I'm going to need a calculator. 29 times 7. I should be able to do this without one. 29 times 7. 203. Okay. So that's going to give us negative 203 x squared. And then 29x times 3 is going to be 57x. Alright, so we subtract. These cancel out. Negative 22x squared minus negative 28. Oh, I'm sorry. Minus negative 203x squared. That's going to be, well, 203 minus 22 is 181. Yep, x squared. And then 5 minus 57, that's going to be negative 52x. Then we'll drop down the minus 20. Okay, so almost last step. What do we put up here so that when we multiply by x squared, we get 181x squared, so plus 181. Okay, so that's going to be 181x squared. 181 times negative 7. I'm not even going to try that. 181 times 7. So negative 1,267. And then 181 times 3. Let's see, 18 times 3 is 54. So 543. Okay, and then we subtract and we're almost done. So these cancel out. 52 minus negative, 52 minus negative 1,267. That's going to be 1,215x. And then negative 20 minus 543 would be negative 563. So this is our remainder. And so it would be plus, and I'm going to run out of room here, so I'm going to write it up here. It's going to be 1,215 minus, x minus 563 over x squared minus 7x plus 3. So that's our remainder. And that's it. I say that with like it's so easy. It's not easy. But when you multiply by an x squared, it's a little bit trickier. Okay, so that's it for today. Your assignment is on the bottom of your note sheet. Good luck.